what they do and have plans.
I don't have to use the mic, right?
But it's okay. Because they know using great people. They don't want to use food on silence, so they don't get confused.
Mr. Speaker, we see in status quo that the environment is getting worse. All these campaigns, all these slogans, all these things that the environmental corporations have been trying to carry out have not been working effectively. And that is why we say that this is the time for the environmental NGOs to start supporting eco-terrorism. So what is eco-terrorism, right? Eco-terrorism is terrorism with an ecological motive, such as attacks against corporations perceived to be harming the natural environment. So what this means is we will allow these eco-terrorism groups, we will allow them to damage factories that are polluting the environment. Let's say they are throwing toxic chemicals into the river, they are releasing all these very harmful gases into the air, and we'll only do this if the fines and all don't work. Like we put these fines, we've already fined them so many times. We've already done all these things to deter them from polluting the environment, but they still don't listen and they still continue. And that is when we use eco-terrorism as the last resort. So, yes.
Do you feel the eco-terrorism is going to be a long-term solution or short-term solution to then re-influence courts and political parties to then lobby for heavier punishments for this corporation?
We are telling you that it will be a long-term benefit because you see, right? All these politicians, all these politicians and all these support these factories because these factories bring a lot of money to them, and that's why all these politicians support all these factories. And we tell you this, right? They support these factories because they're money-minded. But then we tell you that when the environmental NGOs start supporting eco-terrorism, when these factory owners and these politicians and so on know that their buildings will be damaged if they still continue polluting the environment and they still continue doing all these polluting activities, then we say that this will be a long-term benefit because then they will start to reduce the amount of pollution they're doing because they won't want to risk their buildings being damaged and so on. Right? Sit down. So today I have 4 arguments for you. My first one will be how currently there's no one there to defend the environment. Secondly, on why these major environmental NGOs in particular. Thirdly, on how it creates deterrence towards these factories and so on. And lastly, on why prioritizing environmental concern is justified to use eco-terrorism. So my first one, right, on how there's no one there to defend and how there's no one there to defend the environment. So people can protect themselves, we can protect ourselves, but the environment, there's no one there to protect the environment. And that's why it's this environmental NGO's job to protect the environment. We don't feel how these campaigns, they aren't as effective anymore. All these things that we've been trying to do, they aren't that effective, and people are still polluting the environment very badly. So that is why this is the time we should start supporting the environmental NGOs to start supporting eco-terrorism, right? And as I said earlier, all these politicians and all these factories, because they're money-minded and they want to get money, and because all these politicians and all, they're a large group, because of all their supporters and all these people are against the environment because they're supporting these factories and so on, they're polluting the environment. And that is why we say we need these environmental NGOs to step in and support this kind of eco-terrorism as a sort of deterrence towards these factories and so on. Right, to my second argument on why these major environmental NGOs in particular. So these environmental NGOs, they have more influence. People expect these NGOs to help us protect our These NGOs help us these people expect these NGOs to help us protect the environment and keep our world safe and all these things. A lot of expectations to us is these environments. And that is why we say that like currently the fines and all, they're not working because let's talk about these factories, right? These large factories, they have a lot of money and they're, as I said, they're very money-minded. So just bring a small fine on them, it won't really affect them that much. They'll just continue polluting the environment so that they can get more money. And see, that's why these fines that they're putting on the factories aren't working. And that's why they have a lot of money on. And that is why we say that eco-terrorism is the last resort and the best way we can reduce the pollution that these factories and these corporations and all are doing, right? The second level, how society will react. So society will see that when the environmental NGOs, when they're supporting eco-terrorism, something that wasn't supported in the past, they'll begin to realize like, oh wow, our environment is this bad. The situation is this dire that these NGOs have to start supporting eco-terrorism. And yeah, there's something like, oh, our actions all these times have polluted the environment, all these things, all of this stuff has led towards the environmental NGOs starting to support eco-terrorism, and this will then help people know that of all the actions we've done and all, they're that bad, and because of all of this, society will begin to realize the importance of why eco-terrorism is there and so on, and how the actions are what have caused us to go to this last resort, right? Now, my third argument on how it creates deterrence towards polluters. So even if arson does pollute the environment, we say that it is a fair trade-off, because in the past, these factories and all they polluted the environment so much, done all these things in these funds and all around the world. And if arson does cause a small amount of environmental pollution, we say that this is a fair trade-off, because it is a small short-term harm which will then bring a large long-term benefit, and this is completely justified, right? To my second level on time sensitivity, we see now that the environment is so badly damaged. We see that the ozone layer is thinning, the icicles are melting, the global warming is getting worse. We see that all of these things are getting very bad, and we see that's why the environmental NGOs need to start supporting eco-terrorism now. This is what we see. It is very dire for this to happen now. Take for example China. China is so badly polluted. The air is so bad over there, and that's why, to prevent the rest of the world becoming like this, to prevent more air pollution and done by factories and corporations and so on, that's why we should start supporting eco-terrorism now. And to my third level on how it will affect the factory owners. So these factory owners, they're money-minded, and they obviously want to make more money. And because these factory owners, right, because the reason why they pollute the rivers now is because it's the easiest way, it's the cheapest way for them to be able to make more things or be able to produce more things. But you see, right, in the end, we'll be helping these factory owners also, because in the end, when the environment is so badly damaged, when the rivers are all polluted and all, this will in the end affect the factories also, and the factories won't be able to get their sources and so on. So we say in the end, we also like helping society, and in the end, we're also bringing a long-term benefit towards the factory owners and all these corporations as well. Now, to my final argument on why prioritizing the environmental concern is environmental concern is justified with the use of eco-terrorism. So as I said earlier, when the environment is so badly damaged, it affects everyone. It affects the factory owners. It affects individuals. It affects all these politicians. It affects everyone. All these people who earlier were money-minded, we'll be able to help them. In a way, we'll be helping them by supporting eco-terrorism, because then the amount of pollution will reduce, because obviously people these factory owners wouldn't want to risk their buildings being damaged and so on. And we say that this is the best form of deterrence that we could possibly do right now because it is so dire right now, and this is the final option that we have to do now, because the other methods haven't worked. With that, I'm very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We have your proposition.
Thank you.
Is this something wrong with the live stream?
Sorry?
Is this something wrong with the live stream?
I believe so.
It's like frozen.
Sorry, it got stuck.
Ladies and gentlemen, if there's one thing we're willing to concede from the Prime Minister, was that these NGOs who do support environmental protection are immensely influential. They hold immense sway over public opinion on how environmental protection should go about, and we think that their policy of these NGOs supporting eco-terrorism, something which is ultimately radical, something which causes active harms against innocent third parties, we think that at that point they lose their legitimacy and necessarily lose influence and political lobbying power. We think that that side is the one that's going to ultimately harm the fight against environmental protection. We are not willing to support that. That's the stance that we think that opposition can take today. I'm going to look at two things in this speech today. I'm first going to tell you why eco-terrorism is unjustified and why it should never be supported, especially by these NGOs who claim to support environmental protection. Secondly, I'm going to tell you why this harms the ability of these NGOs to lobby for positive change. Because in order to have lobbying power, you need to fight for policies that protect the environment. You need to hold this influence. Before that, 3 points of rebuttal. Number one, they tell us that NGOs are so influential, right? And I've already told you an opening line. That's why we think they should oppose eco-terrorism. Considering the fact that they wanted to characterize eco-terrorism as burning buildings, right? That you're causing active harm to those corporations, that you are hurting the loggers who go out and chop trees. You are like hurting them, and because those people are so innocent, you are causing harm against them that is fundamentally unjustified. We think that the end goals that they want to achieve does not necessarily need to be achieved by these radical means. We think there are other means to do it, and we don't think that you should do it this way. So we think that because NGOs are so influential, they should not support this sort of harmful methods. Secondly, the crux of their case, right, was that they assumed that people would react positively to this form of eco-terrorism. The argument was basically that people will see this and then they will know how environmental protection was so important, but gave no analysis to why that would hold true. But we think this is not true on two levels. Number one, we think that society will not view the ends of which these eco-terrorist acts are done for, but rather they will view the means in which they were done. That means they're talking about the media, focusing on the deaths of the vlogger who were hurt, focusing on the damage caused by eco-terrorists. We think that's counterintuitive and to the most people, right? But secondly, on the idea of corporations, they feel threatened, which means, sit down, that they would use their influence to fight against these NGOs and their ability to lobby for change. But secondly, they would try to protect themselves, like using force, for example, hiring security guards. And we think this ultimately achieves nothing under that side, fighting a war between corporations and environmentalist groups. But lastly, they wanted to tell us about time sensitivity. They said that we should start now. We'd say that that is a short-term benefit. All the attention that they want to garner is all in the short term, because in the long run, you can never sustain something against the law for a long period of time. You can never achieve sort of positive change by using negative methods and